Tell them what you need because you have needs.
What are your expectations in this relationship? How do you see me in 10 years? And it can't just be that I'm going to be your wife and be cooking for you and, doing all the wifely things. What vision do you have for me? I need to know. Because if the only vision you have for me is I'm going to just meet your needs and demands, you can't articulate where you expect to see this woman that you want to.
Welcome to Illuminate Psychology with Dr. Rola, where we shed the light on emotional and psychological healing. Today is going to be an amazing day because we are going to learn about recovery from betrayal trauma. I have a wonderful guest with me. She's going to share her story. It takes a warrior and a survivor to do that. Her name is Bisi. Bisi, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
So what we wanted to do is allow Bisi to share her story. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
And thank you, Dr. Rola, for having me.
You're so welcome.
So this is, I'm going to put it out there to say, even though I'm a little nervous about this, I think it's time to have this conversation. And if this helps just one person, this exercise is not to vilify anybody, but to talk about my journey. And hopefully, if that helps just one person, I have done good in the world. So having said that, I am the first of 5 children. We're 2 years apart. My parents, even when they were going through whatever journey they were going through, which I was privy to because I'm the first child, there was one thing that always unified them, and it was the children. They had a unified vision about what experiences they wanted their children to have. The other thing about being a first child and a girl, was that I was also very responsible for my 4 siblings. Even though we were exactly like 18 months apart from my immediate younger brother, you would think it's 5 years. I was responsible for making sure that they walked the straight and narrow path, that they didn't get into trouble. And one of the things that was jumped into me as a child is your siblings are watching you. So if you're good, they're going to be good. If they're bad, they're going to be bad. And so I grew up taking care of everybody else, making sure I was a good kid. And I think that informed, even though I didn't know it at the time, I think it informed my choice of a marriage partner.
I see.
Because I didn't, when choosing a marriage partner, I don't think that I paid attention to what he can do for me. It was more of, okay, I found this guy, I love him, he loves me, let's go. So what are those check marks? What value is he going to bring to the table? It didn't matter because I could fix it.
I see. You know, the reason I was laughing when you were talking, Bisi,
Right.
is I'm the oldest daughter. I have an older brother.
Right.
But my older brother started calling me mommy when I was in my teens.
Yeah.
And I think subconsciously you bear that burden.
Yes, you do.
To set the example and be that perfect person.
Yes.
Which evidently has its positives.
Yes.
But from what you're saying, may also have its negatives and also affect the way we define love.
And interact with
and interact with others.
Yes.
And I think that's very powerful that you raised that. So you told me a little bit about your parents, about
did.
no family is perfect. Your parents had their issues, but
Right.
they were united about taking care of you and your siblings. At what point did you grow up to where you met your husband?
Right.
Where did you guys meet? What was that about? I'm just curious.
So we met in college.
Yes.
I was in, I think, my second year, and he was in his third, or it has to be, I was my second and he was his third. And the campus that we were together was a small campus, was a state university. I'm originally from Nigeria, and the equivalent of, I'm also in Kennesaw, so the equivalent of like a Kennesaw State University.
Kennesaw State University.
It was a smaller, at the time that we were attending it, it was a much smaller school. The focus, because we're also in a very small town, the focus at the time was really, and I'm also a Christian, that's my faith. I think the focus of that was really, we go to campus fellowship. Our interactions that was all it was. There was no avenue to really test ourselves outside of our campus fellowship and our friends. Even though we did it for 7 years, I think that was the entirety of our relationship, was school, fellowship, occasional times we'll travel. And I think that was it.
Yeah. So you met him early in your university career, and you dated him for how long?
For 7 years.
Wow. And you were there for him through his journey professionally, even as a student and all.
Right.
That's a long time.
That is a long time. A very
How were
long
you
time.
guys able to sustain the relationship? Because a lot of times when people meet in university, things don't work out. What was it about uniqueness of your relationship that kept it going for so long?
So the first thing that fascinated me about this young man was how good looking he was. He was very good looking. He dressed really nicely, very well mannered. But I knew that we were completely from two different worlds. And that kind of fascinated me. I knew that I grew up in a world that was, but it was more of a bubble. I was very sheltered. And he was just, he was a very, studious person, very serious-minded, knew what he wanted out of life. But it was one of the things that attracted me to him was how serious he was about his future, what he wanted to do out of life and all that. Mind you, I'm comparing him with my brothers who pretty much lived a very soft life and didn't take anything very seriously.
So that was definitely something that attracted you.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
Was that kind of in line too with the way you felt very responsible coming up as
Yes,
an older child?
I think so
having
too.
somebody else who seemed very responsible,
Yes.
who was responsible in what they were doing at the time was something that you felt like you could connect with?
Definitely, yes, definitely. Again, remember that I said earlier that I'm comparing with my brothers.
Yeah.
My brothers were very playful. And rightly so, because there was really nothing for them. By the way, right now they're all very high net worth and doing really good in life. But they didn't need to really, again, soft life. They had a backup if anything fails. But this young man at the time did not. So he took life very seriously.
So talk a little bit, please, about, because we're talking about betrayal trauma.
Right.
That's when somebody who is close to you, somebody you deeply care about, somebody you rely on, harms you. And they're different forms.
Yes.
Some of it is infidelity, some of it is neglect, abandonment, they're different kinds. But this is one of the most painful types of trauma because it's interpersonal.
Yes, it is.
Somebody you deeply care about, somebody you've relied on. How did you even how was the dynamic in your relationship when you got married? Also, how did that play out? Was there betrayal from the beginning? How did things play out? You married this guy. Did you have a beautiful wedding?
We had a celebrity, what you would call a celebrity wedding.
So you were all decked out, everybody looking
my goodness.
good. Okay, good.
It was the happiest
Were you
day of
deeply
my
in
life.
love?
I was madly in love.
So do you see how talking about betrayal now just seems like, but betrayal did happen.
It did.
Tell us how things kind of evolved, or maybe even devolved.
So let's back it up a little bit, because you talked about the betrayal in the marriage, and I want to back it up to when we were dating. One of the things that, again, like I said, we came from completely different worlds. I had a car in college. We're talking about, this is 1989, 90. It's very common now, but it wasn't then. So we had decided to go exclusive. He was my boyfriend, I was his girlfriend. In hindsight, I think I would have done that a little different. And what do I mean by that? As soon as we had decided this is, we're moving forward together as a unit, I pretty much drove the relationship. I went to visit him. Officially, I was his girlfriend. Unofficially, I think I became his mother and his wife.
Wow.
Because I did everything a wife would do. I cooked for him. I drove to wherever he was placed. I drove there. Even in the midst of strikes, in Nigeria, there was a time in Nigeria where there was a lot of strikes and all that. I would drive to the different cities in the midst of all that chaos to go see him. If I was going to talk to my younger self, I was going to tell her, don't do that. He's still your boyfriend. Let him prove himself to you. Let him do the chase, Even though, yes, we had declared we're a unit and all that. But I was the drive and the energy of that whole 7 years of relationship. And of course, that was the foundation of our relationship. And naturally, that foundation morphed itself into our marriage. By the time we were working, I was already working in a bank. He was still doing his youth service. There's this 1 year thing that we do in Nigeria. And again, morphed into when we came to the United States, when we relocated to the United States. The entire time, I'm the one driving it, making sure the T's are crossed, the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, doing the work where he goes to school, taking care of the children. By that time, we had a kid. You just keep studying, go to school, do whatever you need to do. I'll take care of everything else. And by the time he was ready, by the time I really began to, make a demand on the relationship, we had gone some 15 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
That's a long time. And I decided he was at a place where I could now begin to make a demand on the relationship. And the demand, the boundaries that I was setting was met with a lot of resistance. I think it is at that point that I began to realize, wait a minute, what exactly is going on here? Because this is not how I envisioned the transition to be.
So would you say that you felt that you were investing in taking care of almost everything needed in the home, waiting for that time when he would be done with his career, the foundational part of it, and then you were ready to maybe do less and get him to do more? Or where was this betrayal coming from?
So this for me was a situation where I was like, okay, based on, having taken stock of both my life and his, and mind you, I also come from a very patriarchal society where the man is the breadwinner and the financial taker of the relationship. So having that background, we were both invested in making sure that he was in a financial place where he could take care of his family. So everything about our relationship together, dating and marriage, was directed towards that. Because in my childhood, the men took care of their families. Even when the wives were working, they prided in being the financial, shoulders that the family, is on. So the whole energy was directed towards that. So when he got to a place where he was financially comfortable enough to now transition into my vision of him being the caregiver financially, I met a lot of resistance. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute.
When you say you met a lot of resistance, he wasn't...
He just...
And he didn't consider it a priority, or he didn't want to do it, or...
Because I was changing the rules of engagement on him. The entirety of our marriage, of our relationship, courting and dating, I bore all that burden. So why the sudden change, I think, is he would be able to be in a better position to tell you what his thought process was. But I definitely changed the rules of engagement on him.
Did you feel like you were changing the rules, or you were just doing what you believed he would have understood that needed to happen?
It should have been a very natural transition, in my opinion. The whole essence of building you up to this is so you can do all these other things. So what was the point? So the betrayal for me was, what was the point of spending all those years doing all that work only to now get to this point in our lives where I'm thinking, okay, we have arrived. It's time for you to be the man of the house and do what I've always thought men did. And the answer is no.
Wow. And so how did that make you feel? What was going on in your mind? Tell us about that moment when you felt like maybe your sense of trust in the relationship and him as a provider or as a person who was going to take care of the family was broken.
That's a good question. Because I don't think there's a moment.
I see.
I think there's a build-up to whatever that moment is. I don't think there's a moment. And I also think that in hindsight, if you pay attention enough, there were breadcrumbs all along the way.
I see.
There were red flags all along the way. I remember the first time I had it was a shock to me. Mind you, up to this point, again, when we came to the States, I was the one working, he was the one in school. We had a child. Life was good. We're a very happy young couple. And up to that point, I was the one working 100% and he was at school. But again, because of the patriarchal society that I came from, even though I was the one making the money, I didn't think I was making the money. This was a household money at the time. That's what I thought. It was our money. But for the purpose of this conversation, I was the one doing all the work. But everything was in his name. The rent was in his name. The utilities were in his name.
Interesting.
So one of the things they tell us to do when you come to the state is to go get a secured credit card.
That's right. To build your credit.
And the secured credit card naturally will come from the person who's paying the bills, whose name is on the bills and all that. So of course it was in his name. But that's not a problem because we're a unit, right? Until I asked for the credit card. I wanted to use it to buy something and he said absolutely no. And I was like, wait a minute. This is our credit card. Even though your name is on it, but it belongs to us. And so I think that was the first time ever that I was like, whoa, wait, what?
So you experienced a sense of shock.
I was like in shock, like, how is this happening? Right? 20 years later, I always go back to that experience and wish that I recognized that as a red flag.
So a lot of people that go through betrayal trauma, because of their close connection to the person who is hurting them, they do not see it. They ignore
don't
it.
even
They
recognize it as a red flag. I always like to use the, you're driving on the road, you're seeing all the signs everywhere. If you don't know what a stop sign is, you don't know to stop. If you don't recognize, it's one thing to see it, it's another thing to understand what it means, how to interpret it. I think for me, first of all, there were crumbs, there were red flags, but I didn't even recognize them as red flags. So because I didn't recognize them as red flags, there is no action to take when you don't even recognize what you're seeing. You can't interpret what you're seeing.
So there was no discussion to have about what expectations are. So what did you do? Just keep on doing what you were doing?
You know what, that was a glitch. You know what, that was because, expectations were different. So you begin to make excuses for all these things, except to label them for what they are, red flags.
Red flags. And that's why betrayal trauma is so serious, because of the closeness with that person and being repeatedly exposed to it. The person is experiencing this on an ongoing basis for very long periods of time. And by the time they finally realize what they've gone through, they're experiencing very serious symptoms like PTSD.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. By the time, and like you said, like you rightfully said, it takes a long time. I was a very confident young lady. I was so sure of my world. I knew what I wanted out of life, and I knew exactly how to get it. And I became someone who would double check everything because I wasn't sure anymore.
You're second guessing yourself.
I'm second guessing myself.
Your
That's the word I
self-esteem was.
Oh, it had taken. I mean, I still presented confident, but I was second guessing myself for everything. Wow. And to my shock, I even started having panic attacks.
Wow.
And I did not understand what was happening to me. What was the source of it? One thing that I, always like to also share is that when you are in an abusive relationship or in a toxic relationship, or however we want to label it, again, just like the red flags, you have to know and understand what you're experiencing is wrong. It's not normal. It's not a clash of personalities. It's not, for every relationship, across board, there should be a baseline mode of operandus. There's some things that are just basic about a union between, even friendship. There's just some basic human things that should happen. And if those things are not happening, then you are in a toxic relationship. It's as simple as that.
And identifying it and labeling it can be difficult. But at some point you finally did that.
Yes, I did.
And then what happened?
So
when you finally know this is not a glitch.
This is happening.
This is happening.
This is happening.
What then happened?
So being the fixer that I am, because I fix everything, I believe there is nothing in this world that doesn't have a solution. That's my, that's the way I view the world. So I was going to fix it. So So the thing I did was, my solution to this problem was, okay, I had built this life with this man, or so I thought. I am not reaping the benefits of this investment, so I thought. Okay, I'm going to write it off as a bad debt.
Interesting.
I am going to recalibrate. We spent the past 15 years, or whatever, building him up. He's not meeting whatever expectations that was set, and mind you, they're very basic. This is not, being extravagant. This is just basic things of life. The children needs to go to school, extracurricular activities. I mean, just the regular things of life. Okay, so I was going to, in any case, that was the original plan. I was going to go back to the original plan, which is when we finish building you up to a place where you can stand on your 2 feet, we're going to redirect the energy of the relationship and build me. And even though we were going to do it together, just like we did it for you, we're going to do it for me too. Okay, change your plans. I was going to do it for myself. I was not going to get any support from you. And so I launched out again and started to work on myself. And interestingly enough, I met resistance again. And that really broke my heart, because what is going on here?
So your heart was broken?
It was
Was that another layer of betrayal?
Another layer of betrayal. I expected us to do me. You don't want us to do me, which is fine. We can still make this work. But now you're sabotaging everything that I want to do. We have a problem. Houston, we have a problem. Yeah.
At this point, can you describe what kind of emotions were you going through? I know you talked about having a panic attack. What was that like? Where did that happen? Can you describe it for some people that don't really know? And then tell us a little bit about the emotions that you experienced.
Emotions. Hopelessness. How do I get out of this rut that I created? I am a co-creator of this existence that I'm living, and I hate it.
Hate it.
Anger. I was mad. I was angry at myself. How could I be so stupid and so naive? I know better. I was angry at him. How dare you? Because I think you took advantage of me. You took advantage of my naivety. Because if you had told me from the get-go that the whole reason why we were 100% focused on you is so that you can get to that place where you can do things for us. If you had hinted at some point in this whole journey to say, hey, I'm not interested in that part, we would have I remember what arguments that we were having. I can't even remember what it is. Very early on in the relationship, I realized that if I asked for anything about me, it was definitely a big no. So I got that conditioning very quickly on. But what I was never able to settle into is when I asked for things for the children. I grew up as a child where the men around me, regardless of all their different flaws, took care of their children. So I didn't really know there was a world where men did not take care of their children. So this was new to me. And so that we fought a lot about. I would need something for the children, and I'd be like, and of course I don't have access to, the finances or anything. So it's not like I could go in there and
go
just
into your account
and take something. I have to ask him. So we would really, really fight about that, because I just couldn't understand a world where some things that I considered basic would not be, would be met with a lot of resistance. So that also, and I would watch my children. I couldn't provide those things for them, and I couldn't convince my husband or the father to provide those things for them. At the very minimum, I wanted them to have something that was close to my childhood, which I think is still one of my regrets is, they didn't.
Do you feel like you disappointed them or you failed in that?
I definitely did. I feel like I failed them. I feel that in the decisions that I made, I did feel them.
Wow.
Yes.
That must have been very difficult.
It was.
For you to
It was a lot of emotions for me.
Tell me about the panic attacks.
So the panic attacks. Remember, as a child. One of the things I enjoyed to do was, when I was growing up in Nigeria, even when our house was the meeting, was always the meeting point. All my parents' friends who come to our house for whatever reason. Sometimes something doesn't happen; they just show up, and it was customary for the women to go to a different direction, and the men would hang out. I used to love hanging out with the men. The topics, the politics, all those things. I would sit down and have conversations with them, and then my mom would come pull me away and drag me to the women's section. Like, you're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to be here. I forgot what your question was.
The question was about panic attacks.
Okay,
what was
good.
That experience with you?
That was the reason why I said that. So I was a very confident child. I could walk into a room and have a conversation. My first panic attack that I remember, I was at the store with a girlfriend. We were at the counter. She was ordering some things, and then she looked around and she had forgotten her umbrella in the basement of the mall that we went to. And I was like, no, finish what you're doing. Let me go grab the umbrella. I went down the escalator, picked up the umbrella, looked up, and I didn't recognize where I was. And the more I tried to figure out where I was, I suddenly felt like a 5-year-old lost.
Interesting.
And, and I didn't know what was happening to me. I had to really find somewhere to sit. I literally sat on the floor because I felt like I was going to pass that, right.
To kind of make you feel grounded.
Yes. So I sat on the floor. Just the people came over. Are you okay? Are you okay? And then, of course, my girlfriend came down the escalator, was like, what, and they wanted to call the ambulance. And I said no. She took me to the car, and we sat in the car for like a good 20 minutes because this is a confident Bisi. What's going on?
How were you able to link that panic attack with what was going on?
At the time, I didn't.
You didn't?
At the time, I did not know what that was. I didn't even know it was a panic attack. How about that?
I've had some patients tell me they didn't know it was a panic attack.
I didn't know
what they were going crazy.
Yeah.
And that they needed intervention, but they did not know.
I did not know what it was. I've been having all kinds of crazy things happening to me, my body, mentally, and all that. So I just knew something was happening, but I didn't know what it was. Obviously, later with more information is when I realized, that was a panic attack, because I had a few more after that.
Wow.
Right.
So your body was kind of feeling the trauma. Was that affecting your sleep?
My body, I was shutting down. I was dying very slowly.
You felt like you were dying.
I definitely was dying very slowly. I started to develop issues, physical. I started to forget a lot.
That's one of the signs. Concentration was difficult.
Yes. If I think too hard, I have this migraine.
Interesting.
I would forget the most. So I wrote everything down.
Interesting.
I wrote my children's name down, their birthdays, just because I felt like, okay, what is happening to me? I'm literally, am I having dementia? Is this what dementia is?
And these are common symptoms for people who have experienced
Right.
trauma.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that feeling that physiologically they're
Yes.
starting to feel what they're experiencing.
Yeah.
Especially because you're right in that space. You're not away from it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no breather.
Another emotion that I want to highlight is I was very resentful.
Mm.
I was like, I just could not believe this was happening to me.
Your sense of safety and how your foundation had been shattered.
It had been. I what I thought was security that we had built together was false. Did not exist.
That must have been painful when you came to that realization.
Yeah.
So, with all this happening, the emotions, what kind of conclusions were you making about how you were feeling? About everything? Because now you've gone past the realization. You now know that there's betrayal. You can't trust that this person will meet your needs the way you expected to. And now your body's suffering. You're struggling emotionally. Concentration is limited. What is the next step with all this? And you do have children to take care of.
I do.
So how does this even play out?
2 parts. The first thing I tried to do was again to fix it. I was going to go out there, develop me, and I think I said that earlier, it met some resistance. And when I realized that was not, I couldn't make that happen because of the proximity that I had with this man. If we were going to experience any resemblance of what I considered a normal life, it was necessary to make an exit.
Wow.
And that was one of the most difficult decisions of my life, because I suddenly came to a realization that I couldn't fix this.
So for a fixer, for once, you can't fix it.
I cannot fix this.
There must have been a lot of grieving that went with that. Because when you've done something so well and you've been known for it, and this is how you define yourself, and then this most important thing doesn't work out, it must have been devastating.
It was. It was life.
So you decided to do what?
So I had gone to a lawyer 8 years prior. And I told the lawyer I wanted to get an apartment. I just needed some distance. I wasn't ready to divorce or anything like that. I just needed some distance from whatever it is I was experiencing at that time. And one of the good things that I always did was, regardless of what was going on in my life, I always met with a professional. Any decision that I wanted to take, I'm going to talk to an expert about it. This is what I want to do based on your expertise and your experience in the industry. What do you think about it? So what I was going to do then was rent an apartment. I had 2 boys then. I had not had my girl. I have 3 kids now. And then, of course he was going to know where I live, but I just wanted, to be separated physically from him. Yes. And she said I couldn't do that. If I leave my children with him, I could be accused of negligence. If I take them with me, I could be accused of kidnapping. So 2 things I could do. One was to file for a legal separation, or the other was to file for a divorce. When I was thinking about it, I found out I was pregnant. So that put a stop to that, because I didn't want this new child to come into the world without a unit, a family with the father and the mother. So this time around, I was clear. I did not want a legal separation. I wanted out. Complete. I wanted a clean slate. Interestingly, I did tell him that, based on a lot of things which I do not want to disclose here, that I wasn't in good conscience, did not want to continue to be his wife. We're going to start on a clean slate. I was open to starting, afresh, dating again, doing the whole process. But I was going to divorce him.
Interesting. So you were thinking maybe in the future
we can still.
This is the fixer Bisi.
We can still make it.
We
work.
can be together. But for now, you felt so much was going on, and that's what you need to do. Very difficult decision.
It is.
The fact that you even had talked about the possibility of getting back together.
We did.
At the point of divorce.
Right.
Says something about how much you really were, how much you cared for him, and how much you invested in your marriage.
Yeah.
Wow.
I did.
So you made that decision, and obviously he was not.
No.
He was not happy about it.
The divorce process was the most acrimonious process that we ever went through.
And a lot of couples will say that because there's a thin line between love and hate. So when people have deeply invested so much in each other, so many years, any kind of separation can be very stressful on the family and very difficult. They used to say that family court is where you see the best people at their worst. Now, putting that, just moving forward, how are you able to get to where you are now? Did you start focusing on, how did you move with your emotions? How did that evolve? There was the anger, the helplessness, the resentfulness. What ended up happening with you emotionally and physiologically?
My emotions were very intense, to the point they were paralyzing. I could not do. I was filled with so much rage. I think I was more angry at myself than I was at him, because I realized that I was a co-creator of this mess that I was in. I let it happen to me. At least that's my conviction. And so I think the anger, a lot of it was towards him, obviously, but I think a big chunk of it was towards me too. But I needed to process through it and find a solution.
The fixer.
The fixer. There has to be a solution to that. And so, like I always do, the first thing I did was to get a therapist. I gave the therapist what my goals were. And we spent the next 3 years. I went every week. I went every week to see my therapist. We set new goals, And then I also went to a group therapy. It's called Divorce Care for anybody out there. It's a great program.
Divorce Care.
Divorce Care. It's a fantastic program. I recommend it for anybody going through. I also did that. I read a lot of books. First of all, I needed to understand how I got here. Even though I knew that I was a co-creator of what I did, what exactly could I have done better? So all that, and then of course my children, I needed to be in the right frame of mind to be present for them, and I have the necessary tools to also recognize that they also went through this trauma with me.
With you.
And to be able to assist them to also go through their own processes. I think it was, again, the fixer in me. This is where we are. What do we do?
What are we going to do about it? Right. What I think was unique is, this time around, different from what you experienced in your marriage. You were actually receiving from people now.
I was.
And you were humble and made yourself vulnerable to listening to another person's perspective.
Yes.
And sharing your pain with others who are going through the same thing.
Yes.
And for anybody who is struggling there with betrayal, some people have experienced molestation, abused family members. Some people have experienced being called names and treated differently. Whatever that is, you went out to look for healthy ways to manage this.
Yes, I did.
And you realized that even though your anger was justified, it needed a place to go, and you worked through it. Was that journey difficult, or was it easy? Or can you give some,
There's nothing that's easy about this process.
Even the recovery, even after you made up your mind.
The recovery it is worth it, but there is nothing easy about, trying to process through a trauma. It's one thing to go to your therapist to pour yourself out and be vulnerable. It's another thing to go back and do the homework. When they give you the tools of what to do, you have to go. And that process is excruciating.
The practicing of it.
It's painful.
But what made you keep at it?
Because this cannot be my final destination.
Wow. So this is for anybody out here, this is not the end of my story.
I refuse to accept that this is the end of my story. I have made a huge mistake of my life, but this cannot be my destination.
My goodness. This is just passing through.
This is just passing through.
So whatever it's going to take.
And it doesn't define who I am.
I love it.
I am just going through.
But as you were going through, you were crying through it?
Oh, I cried. I am grateful for my girlfriends. You all know who you are. There will be days that I will just pick up the phone and just cry. I'll say nothing. I just weep. And they listen. They stay on there. Sometimes they start praying while I'm still crying. But here's the funny thing. So there was one night that I called one of my sister friends, is what I like to call them. And I was just weeping. I was wailing. I think I did quite a bit of crying. And and when I was doing it, I said, I'm done now. I'm going to hang up. And I hung up. And then she calls me the next day, and I was upbeat again. And she was like, how is that even possible? That the way I cried the day before, it was her, she would spend another 3, 4, 5 days in bed. I love a good cry.
That was part of your therapy.
I love a good cry. When I need to cry, I cry.
And the research actually shows that therapy, tears helps, is therapeutic for the mind. And body.
Once I'm done crying, I sleep. I wake up the next day. It's a brand new day.
Better. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. How were you able to ask people to help you? Did you have friends who helped you beyond the professionals? How were you able to get that help if you had it? Or how did that go? Because here we are. He has the career that you worked with him, and he has the resources. You don't.
I didn't.
So how do you even... I imagine you couldn't do that on your own. You didn't have the finances.
I didn't. Right.
So what did you do? And
so the good thing that I think the lifesaver for me is obviously you're not going to be broadcasting your issues all over town, but the ones that were close enough that hid things. I didn't have secrets with my friends. If I was having some difficulties or some frustrations, one or two of them is aware of it. So that's aside. When it really became really bad, where I needed help, it is not easy to ask for help, even as close as I am to these girls or to these people. By the time I am calling you for any assistance, whatever it is, I've had 2 or 3 sleepless nights about it. So it's not like I just wake up and I go and just ask for help. I think it's for anybody with a little bit of self-dignity, I don't think it's easy to just keep asking people for help. I think, at least I speak for myself, it was difficult. And I think that my friends also knew that by the time that I am calling to ask for this help, I am out of options. Because if I could fix it on my own, I would have done that. And again, I'm forever grateful. You all know who you are. By the time I call and I say, hey, I need this, they get up and go do it. It was always yes and amen.
So you had to overcome that feeling of shame. Is that fair to say that you're feeling shame? And go ahead and receive from them.
It wasn't overcoming. Even with the shame.
You're walking with the shame.
I'm walking with the shame to go do it. Because by the time, and they don't know this, so they'll be hearing this for the first time. By the time, and when we're going through this, whatever it is that are helping me to solve, I'm upbeat, we're all laughing, we're having a good time. And when it's done, I go into my closet and I weep.
Wow.
Because I should not be here where I am asking for help. I had a plan in high school. I had a list of things I should have done by the time I'm 30. This is what I should have accomplished by the time I'm 35. Why am I asking people for help?
So this was deep-seated shame. But what I think you're telling us here is, even when we don't feel like it, if we need it, we must go for it.
If you need it, you must.
We can't give up, because if we don't get the help, then we can't.
And if you don't tell people, even your closest friends do not know the depth of what you're going through. Especially because if you wear the pain well, unless you tell them,
they're not gonna know.
They're not gonna know.
So there are people dying out there. You don't have to tell the whole world, but you can tell.
You can tell your closest friends
and share that burden and not carry it alone.
Yes, and you might get a no. How about that? You might get a no.
That's true.
But there is one person out there.
Come on now.
One that is graced to help you to the next place in your life. You don't need the whole.
And you have met those people.
I have met those people. I have them as friends.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I hope this is encouraging somebody. We're coming to the end of it. We've talked a lot. I've totally enjoyed you sharing your journey.
Thank you.
And I'm so thankful, because people love to talk about people when they're going through, but very few really share when they've crossed over.
Yes.
And Bisi, you have clearly crossed over.
I have. I'm happy
and
to say
beautiful.
That. Right.
What would you tell your younger self now? The fixer Bisi, the oldest daughter in the family, telling everybody how to do it, always having a plan. And also, what is the way forward for you? So we're going back, looking at where
looking
you
back.
And then we're also going to be looking forward.
So my younger self, like we say in my Nigerian language, shine your eye.
Open your eye.
Shine your eye well. I would tell the younger self to pay attention. One of the things, and like I said earlier, I think I did, is not to vilify anybody. It's just to help someone out there to make better choices of their life. One of the things that I have said in private conversations, and I'm comfortable to say it openly, is that religion did a number on me.
Wow.
I got saved very, very early. And I think that was...
When you say you got saved, what do you mean?
I gave my life to Christ.
You became a Christian and you became committed.
I became committed to
following
the scriptures according to the Christian faith. And so the one criteria that I had was that he also had to practice my creed. We have to have the same... And that was it. Do we have the same value systems? How did he grow up? What are our childhood traumas? Are they resolved or not? I mean, there's so many, what do we have in common? Do we have similar interests? Right? He's saved, I'm saved, that's it? No.
There's much more to
There is much more to it.
Thank you for sharing that.
There is much more to it. We do not have anything that we can consider in common, really, right? So pay attention to that. That's what I'll tell my younger self. And even when I have met that person who meets all those criteria that I know now, place a demand on that relationship.
Tell them what you need because you have needs.
What are your expectations in this relationship? How do you see me in 10 years? And it can't just be that I'm going to be your wife and be cooking for you and, doing all the wifely things. What vision do you have for me? I need to know. Because if the only vision you have for me is I'm going to just meet your needs and demands, you can't articulate where you expect to see this woman that you want to work with. Because everybody has a vision for themselves.
They do.
But what vision? Because I had a vision for him. I knew, what he was going to be 10 years, 20 years from now. And I would articulate that. But I never asked, what do you think?
And I need to correct what I just said. I said everybody has a vision for themselves. Right. Not everybody does. I need to correct that.
Okay, well, most people do.
But in your relationship,
right.
He had a vision. You had a vision for him.
I did.
And you did not articulate or put a demand on a relationship to understand what his vision was for you. What his vision
was for me.
And what then vision did you have together?
Together.
So you're really challenging us here that even for those who are married, who are single, look at the quality of relationship and don't wait till things get really difficult before you start renegotiating, talking about your needs. If you haven't married yet, talk about it. If you're married, talk about it. But don't assume that the other person knows what. I see what you mean. So what's the way going forward for you?
So going forward, one of the things I'm very intentional about is unlearning those things that make me a co-creator of the trauma that I just went through. It took me all these decades to become that Bisi who, and I don't know how long it's going to take me, but I am very intentional about that. I am also very intentional. I think that self-care for me is going to be a lifelong journey. I am going to prioritize me because I did do that my entire life.
I love it.
Obviously, a lot of self-development.
Yes.
I am going to revisit. I'm revisiting all those dreams that young Bisi had.
I love it.
And doing my best to check them off.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love it. Bisi, what a beautiful time with you sharing your experience. I've known you for a while, but honestly, I have never, ever heard you share your recovery journey. And I just think it's beautiful.
Thank you.
And I think somebody's really going to learn something from it.
I hope so.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Bye.